We had gone to a campsite abandoned years ago, thinking we would find peace in the middle of nature. But some places are never truly abandoned. They are never forgotten. They just wait. And we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what about you? Have you ever stepped into a place and immediately wanted to turn back, but couldn't? Because sometimes, that place doesn't let you leave. Before we start the story, let me know in the comments where you're from, and when you're watching this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Now, let's proceed with our story. Everything started with a weekend trip plan. My friends, Emily, Jake, and Daniel, and I planned to go camping in nature. The spot we chose on the map was hidden near a small town. It looked like the perfect place to camp, isolated from people, deep in nature, and with an untouched valley waiting to be explored. When we arrived in town, we were met with cold stares from the locals. One of the elders warned us that the place we were planning to camp at was dangerous. "What business do you have there?" they asked. Of course, their words didn't stop us. We wanted to escape city life, to experience some adventure. We thought the old man's warning was nothing more than a spooky story, so we continued on our way. But as we entered the forest, an odd unease settled over us. The trees were too silent, the wind didn't seem to blow. It felt like the forest itself was watching us. Once we set up camp, we gathered around the fire and talked. As the night went on, we started discussing the cave near our campsite. Daniel was the most eager to explore it. "We've come all this way. We should at least take a look," he said. After a brief hesitation, we all agreed. Grabbing our flashlights, we made our way to the cave's entrance. The inside of the cave was much larger than we expected. The damp walls echoed our every step. The further we walked in, the colder it got. But the strangest thing was the deep, rhythmic hum, almost as if the cave itself was breathing. Stranger still, we found broken pottery and tattered clothing scattered across the ground. It seemed like people had once lived here but had disappeared a long time ago. As we went deeper, we noticed strange symbols carved into the walls. Some were circular shapes, while others resembled humans but were not quite human. At that moment, I felt something was wrong. "We should turn back," I said. But Daniel laughed and patted my shoulder. "It's just an old cave, relax." But he was wrong. That's when Emily screamed. We all turned to see her flashlight trembling in her hands. "Someone. I saw someone," she whispered. But there was no one there. Just as we decided to head back, a whisper echoed through the cave. It called my name. "Jake." The voice was cold, distant, and unreal. We all stared at each other. Did you all hear that?" I asked. Emily nodded. Daniel's face had gone pale. Jake, however, was staring deeper into the cave. "There's someone there," he muttered. But at that moment, we realized something terrifying. The voice had only called my name. We decided not to go any further and turned back toward the exit. But there was a problem. The path we had come from was gone. Every turn led us deeper inside. We were lost. Suddenly, the sound of scratching against stone filled the air. Deep, metallic, and horrifying. Like something was trying to crawl out from beneath the rock. My heart pounded. "Run!" I shouted, and we all sprinted in a panic through the maze-like tunnels. But running didn't help. The cave was playing with us. At one point, Jake vanished from my side. "Jake!" I yelled, but only my own echo answered. When I turned around, Emily and Daniel were gone too. I was alone. I tried to catch my breath, and then I saw it. A figure, standing in the darkness. Human-like, but not human at all. It had no eyes, yet I knew it was looking at me. It had no mouth, yet it kept whispering. "Jake, why did you come?" My knees buckled, I couldn't breathe. And then, everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was outside the cave. Emily, Daniel, and Jake were with me, but our faces were pale as death. None of us remembered what had happened. All we knew was that we had entered the cave, and then, somehow, we found ourselves outside again. As we walked away, the old man from town was watching us. He approached and whispered, "You're lucky, but don't ever go back. If you do, you won't come out next time." Since that day, I've tried to forget that cave's existence. But every night, as I lie in bed, I still hear that voice in my ears. "Jake, why did you come?" There are moments in life that, no matter how much time passes, you relive when you close your eyes. That night didn't just remain a memory. It became a part of me, carrying its darkness, whispers, and that dreadful feeling everywhere I go. My name is Jake. I'm 26 years old, and I've always had an adventurous spirit. Since childhood, I've been fascinated by nature, forests, and unexplored places. During my university years, camping became a habit. These little getaways with my friends were some of the best moments of my life. But one night, an event overshadowed all those experiences. That was the night I learned that nature isn't always welcoming. If you've subscribed to the channel, let's begin the story. It all started when my 3 friends, Mark, Kevin, and Josh, and I decided to go camping for the weekend. Our destination was a remote forest just outside town, a place few people knew about. There were a few legends about the area, but we didn't take them seriously. By the time we arrived, the sun was setting. We set up our tents, lit a fire, and began eating. At that moment, everything seemed perfect. But soon, the darkness of the night brought an eerie silence. The wind had stopped, and even the sound of insects had disappeared. The only noise was the occasional crackling of the fire. After a while, Kevin raised his hand and whispered, "Do you hear that?" We listened closely. At first, I heard nothing. But then, a faint, muffled murmuring came from between the trees. It sounded like whispers. At first, I thought it was the wind, but there was no breeze. We scanned the darkness with our eyes but saw nothing. Mark chuckled. "It's probably just an animal." But I could see the unease in his eyes. As the night went on, we all grew uneasy. Josh suggested, maybe we should take turns keeping watch until morning. I laughed because it seemed like an overreaction. But deep down, something told me I should agree. I took the first watch. Sitting by the fire, I kept my eyes on the trees. In the darkness, I noticed something. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, but when I blinked and looked again, I saw a figure. Tall, pale, and motionless. It had no eyes, yet I felt it watching me. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe. I wanted to turn around and wake my friends, but I couldn't move. It was as if an invisible force was holding me in place. Then, I heard the whisper again. But this time, it was much closer. "You shouldn't be here." With all my strength, I forced myself to move and ran toward the tents. But then, I heard something that froze me in place. Growling sounds, coming from inside the tents. And they weren't human. That night, we realized we were not alone in that forest. But I still don't know what it was. Because the next time I opened my eyes, the sun was rising. My friends, just like me, didn't remember what had happened. All we knew was that we had all felt the same terror. Since that day, I've never camped in an unfamiliar place again. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I still hear that whisper. "You shouldn't be here." Some fears are so deep that they cannot be described with words, and learning this is one of the worst things that can happen to a person. My name is Brian, I'm 27 years old, and I've always seen the natural world as an escape, a refuge. I love spending weekends in the mountains and forests, far away from the noise of city life. Until that one day, when I had an experience that taught me just how real the dangers under the calm skies could be. If you're subscribed to the channel, let's begin. It all started when I, along with 4 friends, planned to camp near a mountain village. It sounded like a simple and fun plan, but by the evening of that day, everything changed. What was to happen, none of us knew. As we set up our tents, the atmosphere around us began to feel strangely colder. There was a visible change. Before it got dark, an eerie silence blanketed the forest. There were no bird calls, no rustling winds, no animal sounds. Everything had come to a complete standstill. That evening, while sitting around the fire with my friends James and Luke, the air became heavier. Luke, looking around uneasily, said, "This place is strange. Do you guys feel it?" We all looked up and began scanning the depths of the forest. At that moment, something moved in the darkness of the woods. It looked like a human silhouette, but it disappeared quickly. At first, we thought it was just a visual illusion, but something about it started to feel off. Slowly, we began hearing a scream coming from somewhere around us. At first, we thought it was just the wind making a sound, but after a while, the noise became more distinct. It sounded like a whisper, but it was clear. Leave here." We tried to look behind us, but suddenly everything seemed to grow darker. Nothing was visible, yet we could still hear the voice clearly. A coldness began to creep over our bodies. Luke and James looked at each other and said, "We should leave," but for some reason, we couldn't move. It felt as if an unseen force had glued us to the spot. Suddenly, something appeared from the darkness. A human figure, but it wasn't moving. We couldn't tear our eyes away from it. Then, it vanished. It was as if it had never been there. We quickly extinguished the fire and began packing our tents, but the sound of something from the riverbank stopped us. "Don't turn back! Don't turn back!" It whispered. It was so strange that a wave of fear overtook us. Without saying a word, we began running deeper into the forest. Gradually, a suffocating silence enveloped everything. We tried to turn back, but it felt like everything was disappearing. Every path we walked on led somewhere else. It was like trying to get lost in the forest, but no matter how long we walked, we couldn't reach our campsite. Then, once again, that strange whisper came again. This time, it was much closer. Finally, we saw a figure beside us. This couldn't have been a person. Its whole body seemed to be enveloped in fog, visible, yet somehow like a mist. We wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Our eyes were locked on this entity. Suddenly, lights began to flicker, and everything returned to normal. All the fear, all the coldness, seemed to vanish as if it had never existed. But the memory of that moment and the unknowing of what that entity was still haunts us. That night, after leaving the forest, none of us spoke about what had happened. But somehow, that entity had left us a message. That whisper had been engraved in our minds. "This place is not for you." Since that day, I never camped in unknown forests again. And sometimes in the dark of night, I still hear that whisper, "Don't go." Some fears are so deep that only when faced with them does a person truly realize how afraid they are. In that moment, everything becomes real, not just a memory, but a nightmare. My name is Alex, I'm 30 years old, and being in nature is at the center of my life. Escaping the noise of the city and experiencing the peace nature offers has always felt like a refuge to me. I find tranquility in the time I spend by the lake, deep in the forests. But one day, an experience taught me just how dark and dangerous the surface of nature can be. That day, I lived through the most terrifying moment of my life. If you've subscribed to the channel, let's begin. At first, everything seemed like a regular camping trip. It sounded like a relaxing and fun plan. This place was on the outskirts of town, a secluded area few people knew about and even fewer visited. But the moment we stepped onto the ground, I immediately felt that something was off. When we arrived at the campsite, the weather was still nice, but something was changing. As we set up our tents, the silence around us deepened. Everything felt like it was frozen in time. As the sun set, the darkness of the surrounding forest deepened. Normally, while camping, we would all feel relaxed and at peace, but that day felt different. That evening, as we sat around the fire, we suddenly began to feel uneasy. When I recall that moment, I still can't fully explain what happened. The air suddenly thickened, and a weight seemed to settle in. It felt as if something from deep within the forest was watching us. Luke, looking around, muttered, "This place feels really weird. Do you guys feel it too?" We all looked up at the same time and glanced around. Everything seemed normal, but we had started to feel something. Our eyes fixated on the depths of the forest. The darkness had become so thick that it was impossible to see what was out there. But suddenly, we saw movement from the forest's edge. At first, it was just a shadow. But then, we realized the silhouette resembled a human figure. It paused for a moment and then vanished quickly. We all stared at each other in shock. Did we just imagine that? We asked. But something inside us told us that wasn't right. As hours passed, the night grew darker, and the atmosphere around us became even more oppressive. It felt as if every movement in the forest was being watched, as if something was following us. After a while, Luke couldn't take it anymore and said, "This doesn't make sense, we need to leave." But at that moment, we all felt trapped, as if we were being squeezed by an unseen force in the depths of the forest. Something was holding us there. We were terrified, but our bodies couldn't move. Then, we began to hear a sound. At first, we thought it was the wind, but it was too clear. A whisper. Go away." The voice was coming from the darkness. We all froze. It was so clear that it felt as though the sound was in our ears. At that moment, everything began to worsen. We all fell silent, and our eyes were immediately drawn to the depths of the forest. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the darkness. At first, it seemed like just a silhouette, but it quickly began to grow and shift into something else. We had thousands of questions in our heads, but our eyes couldn't leave the figure. We were staring so hard that it felt like we were holding our breath. Then, as if the figure had moved, it started getting closer every time. Our muscles froze. Running, shouting, moving. It felt like there was something in our way. There was fear and horror in our eyes, but none of us could say a word. The fear in our eyes was more than just a moment. It was the knowledge that something was approaching us. Then, just as suddenly, the figure disappeared. We quickly put out the fire and started packing our tents. But for a moment, a sound from the riverbank stopped us. "Don't turn back. Don't turn back." It whispered. The voice was so deep, it seemed to echo inside us. Without saying a word, we began to run deeper into the forest, only following each other with our terrified gazes. But there was something strange. We couldn't find the path. No matter where we tried to go, it felt like we were stuck in a dead end. Every path we took led to another place we couldn't escape. The forest was forbidding us to leave. We wandered for hours, lost in the forest. All we felt was fear. Then, that strange figure appeared once more. This time, it was closer. Its entire body looked like a mist, but it was as clear as ever. It was like something that seeped into everything. Our eyes were locked onto the figure, but we couldn't move. There was a void inside us, an obstacle ahead of us. We wanted to scream, but our voices were silent. Somehow, we couldn't make a sound. Finally, everything suddenly returned to normal. The fear faded, and the oppressive air dispersed. The darkness around the fire disappeared. But as I think back to that moment, I will never know who or what that being was. Each of us carries the pain of not knowing who that figure was. When we left the forest and returned to the town that night, none of us spoke a word to each other. Because that whisper, it was still inside us. This place is not for you. And as I remember that night, I feel that fear deeply. Sometimes at night, I hear that whisper again. Don't go.